Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood for YouTube, and I'm here to continue my read-along review for Tonight and Beguile. Book 4, Chapter 12, Survivor's Guilt. The storm had passed. Caspian's control over Terramore had ended, but the damage was done as the spinning bulb in the lighthouse tore through the night fog in a thick beam of light. The radio in the tower kept going off from the ship that had passed close to shore and saw Rebecca on the landing with the baby in her arm. Rebecca held Eve and Sebastian's child in the cold night air. She looked out into the sea and saw this sprinkling of stars in the sky. They sparkled like diamonds. It was beautiful to her. She sighed, and a puff of white breath came from her drying lips. The baby coyed in her warm arms, only hours old. Rebecca was completely oblivious to the gathering crowd of villagers down at the bottom of the lighthouse, begging her to go back in. This is insanity. What is she doing? One bundled woman yelled. She doesn't seem sane. She's vacant. Look, she won't even look down at us when we're screaming at her, a man said. Then, as the fog thickened, the inn manager's car pulled into the area of the lighthouse. Sebastian in tow. Sebastian did the best he could to stay away from people so he wasn't recognized. He stayed back as the inn manager joined the crowd. Some asked what they should do. Another said he'd return to the village to get Constable Rains. Sebastian hid behind and went back toward the lighthouse, slinking into the damp fog. Mrs. Mrs. Lord, it's too dangerous up there. Come down, the inn manager yelled. Come down, a person joined in, followed by another and another. On the landing of the lighthouse, as the bulb spun around and around behind her, Rebecca's mind was gone. She was only a fraction of herself. Once Caspian was defeated, something snapped in her worse than before. She stood there, the baby now crying for his mother, and Rebecca seemed to not even notice. Vivy, I want my Vivy, she whispered to herself. The cold air still freezing her warm breath as she spoke. Vivy, she whispered again. She was standing there praying that once she did what she promised evil Caspian she would do for her, sacrifice the new baby or her own baby for her own baby's return to life, the life that Bivy, her daughter, would appear. Bibby was gone. Rebecca's mind was gone, too. Slowly and carefully, Sebastian made his way up the narrow spiral staircase that went up the long neck of the lighthouse. The cold, wet air made each of the three rectangle windows of the tower filled with condensation. Little drips formed on the glass and faded down the glass as each of the windows were shedding a tear. Sebastian, too, felt like shedding tears. His baby, his own flesh and blood, was only feet from him, now in the arms of his granddaughter, who had lost her mind, was preparing to do the unthinkable. Sebastian slowly and silently took step by step up to the top of the tower, where the bulb brightly flashed on him and spun around and around. Rebecca, shivering now on the landing, cuddled the baby, ignoring the distant voices at the bottom, screaming for her to come back down. Grandmother, stop, Sebastian said calmly. Rebecca turned around with a snap. Her red and gray hair tore out of the thick braid she tied up earlier in the night. The lucid curls swept across her face, and she turned. Seeing her beloved grandson Sebastian melted her stone heart slightly. She looked down at the baby who resembled him that age and smiled even bigger. You're here. You're really here, Rebecca said softly. Come inside, please, Sebastian asked again calmly. Darling, this is your son, Rebecca said, ignoring him. He was born tonight. Grandmother, bring the baby in, please. Please come inside, Sebastian asked again, slowly walking toward Rebecca. As he inched closer, Rebecca inched backwards. Sebastian, you have to stay back, she suddenly growled. I have to make sure the child goes to the angels. I have to, darling. It's the only way, Rebecca added. Sebastian, now on the landing, bracing himself, tilted his head. Why? Why would you want to hurt my baby? You should want to keep him safe from all harm, just like you did me for my whole life, he said. Did I? Did I protect you? What happened to you? You became something that no human can ever come back from, to the point I asked you to stay away. Is that what you call a good grandmother? Rebecca said, reminding Sebastian she was the one who asked him to pretend to be dead after surviving the fire at Lockwood Thicket set by Alice. That's what I mean. I become something else. And you've asked me to stay away from the family to protect not only me, but them. You know more than anyone that our two worlds cannot coexist. That is you being the strong, protective woman you are, Sebastian noted. But doing this, whatever this is, that isn't the grandmother I know. Please, grandmother, hand me my child, he added. I wasn't, I didn't save you. I didn't save Vivi. And I didn't save your father, my son David. God knows how my mistakes in life affected how Jacob turned out. But doing this, giving this baby back to the angels would fix all that. It will, darling. It will, Rebecca said. The baby began to cry with Rebecca's voice getting louder, and the cold air hitting its innocent little face. She was spiraling and preparing to lose the baby off the landing of the lighthouse and into the sea below. Grandmother, stop this, please. You know this is wrong. Whatever you think you did is not reality. You didn't do anything to Vivi to make her die. You didn't do anything to my father to make him jump from the very lighthouse, and there was nothing you could have done to have saved me. Do you understand? The things that happened to us all would have happened to us regardless. It was destiny, Grandmother. It was our fate. You have to believe me, Sebastian explained. Rebecca seemed confused. His words were clear and truthful, but that didn't mesh with the warped mind games that Caspian had caused her brain to believe. She wanted to Sebastian the baby, but nothing was holding her from doing so. It was her own damaged mind holding her back. No, no, it's all been my fault. Caspian told me he'd bring back Vivi if I helped him. And this is what he wanted. This is what he wanted, Rebecca shouted. I'm sorry, Sebastian. I have to do this, Rebecca said as she swaddled the baby in the blanket tightly and made it a long handle at the top. Then she held the baby dangling over the landing of the lighthouse. Grandmother, no, Sebastian screamed. Screams came from the bottom at the horror of the baby dangling in the blanket. Sebastian's Sebastian lunged at Rebecca and grabbed her arm that held the baby in the blanket. A car at the bottom of the lighthouse pulled in. It was a man who drove off from lighthouse to find Constable Rains returning with Frames and Jacob Ward, both men freshly shaken up from the horrors of Caspian's exorcism. God, good Lord, Jacob said, seeing his mother. Who's up there with him? Rains asked. Jacob couldn't believe his eyes as the lighthouse beams of light spun around and illuminated Sebastian's face. Who is it? Rains asked as he began to motion toward the door to the lighthouse to go up. No, Jacob said, stopping Rains. Let me. I have to do this, realizing whose face he saw in the light. Rebecca and Sebastian struggled over the baby while he screamed in his blanket as it swung back and forth in the air, panting. Rebecca released the tightly wound blanket from around her fist as Jacob reached the tower door that led to the landing. Sebastian was able to snatch the baby and blanket into his own arms and fell backwards onto the floor of the landing. Rebecca screamed in anger as Sebastian succeeding in saving the baby. As she lunged at him, Jacob then too lunged at her and held her back from Sebastian. How dare you! How dare you! She screamed, seeing her dream of Vivi's return shattered before her. Sebastian and the baby huddled on the ground in the shadow of the banister of the landing. The baby screamed in the night, and Sebastian tried to comfort him while Rains, too, finally reached the landing with another police officer and stayed near the top of the stairs. Mother, you need to go with Gregory, Jacob said. No, 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 this isn't what was supposed to happen. I was supposed to get Vivi back, Jacob. Your baby sister. I was supposed to get her back, Rebecca said. Mother, please go with Gregory. We'll get you what you need to do, please, Jacob repeated, his heart breaking into a million pieces at his mother's mental breakdown. Rebecca, shaking in the cold in her derangement, was scooped up by Rains, and the police officer Sebastian slid himself up against the wall of the landing, hiding himself further into the shadow so Rains wouldn't see him. Rains and the police officer took Rebecca, screaming and crying, back down to the winding staircase of the tower, and leaving Jacob still stunned at everything he had seen, including that of his supposed dead nephew, Sebastian the vampire. Sebastian stood up with his baby in arms, now alone with Jacob. How are you standing here in front of me? How are you here, Sebastian? Jacob asked as the lighthouse continued to spin around them both. Miracles happen, Sebastian replied. You were supposed to have died in the fire. I have I was told you died. You can't always believe what you are told, Uncle Jacob, including anything that involves me, Sebastian said. I need to trust you now. I need you to do me the favor and take my beautiful boy back to his mother safely, the vampire added, as the light of the sun was slowly breaking over the waves. Dawn approached. Jacob reached for the child. I mean it, Sebastian repeated, remembering Jacob's past treachery. You can trust me, Sebastian. This baby will be returned to Evie. And sound, I promise, Jacob said truthfully. Sebastian lifted a brow, but handed the now sleeping baby to Jacob, never mentioning that it was me who was here. I think it would disturb Evie. She's gone through enough when it comes to me. I just want her to be happy, and I want her to feel safe. If she were to know I was alive, too, I did I don't know what would happen. I want her to focus on being a new mother, not to have to worry about looking over her shoulder for me. She could continue to believe I died in the fire along with Alice, Sebastian ordered. That is very valiant of you, Jacob said. You are more and more like David every day. I wish you had more time with your father. He would be very proud of the man you've become, Jacob said of his brother and Sebastian's father. I wish that too, but I guess that really was up to you. You chose not to give me more time with my father, Sebastian said in a cold, reminded of Jacob's framing of for killing David's wife. Sabrina was the cause of David's long disappearance. Another victim, a leap from the lighthouse. I deserve that, Jacob said. Don't think it's not lost on that the two of us are here, where he stood with your baby, and you saved him from David's same fate. You've come full circle in a way, Jacob added. Sebastian saw the light, the sun still breaking in the pink glow over the sea. He only had about half an hour to get back to the inn and hide in the shadow. Yet, for a split second, he thought maybe he should let the sun come and take him away forever. What was the what was he living for? What more did he need to see? What more did he need to experience? Then the baby woke up and cried. Sebastian turned back to his uncle from viewing the sea and realized that this baby was the reason for him to live, even if it meant watching him grow up from the shadows. He would not wait to be vanquished by the sun. He had to leave. Take care of him, please. Kiss Evie for me, Sebastian asked. I don't think she'd let me do that, Jacob chuckled. What should we call him? If you have to stay away from him, at least you can do is let you pick the name. Sebastian turned back to his uncle, holding his son on the landing of the lighthouse. The lighthouse beam struck like a halo of light. Seeing the halo, Sebastian thought of the only name he could think of, like the name of a guardian angel. Sebastian's guardian angel named him Gabriel, asking asking to that name. Sebastian said just before he rushed back down the stairs, vanished into the fading light or night, leaving Jacob and the baby alone in the cool night air landing. The light of day cracked through a cloud-filled sky. Terramore House was in disarray. Maids scrambled to clean rooms that had been flipped upside down with the horrors in the night before. Jane, the head maid, seemed to be melting down an incredible amount of work to be done. You'll have to pull it together, Aaron Hampstead. Lord Family Driver shrugged at Jane from an open French door window as she smoked. You're awfully relaxed. I should get you one of the Lintries. We should all be helping, Jane said. Aaron rolled his eyes and tossed his smoldering cigarette into the garden. I just got back from the village. I had to be at the hospital. Hospital? Why? Jane asked as she shooed away one of the younger maids. Aaron did not answer. Just something I was asked to do. The cryptic message slinking with the noisy and gossip maid's mind. Keeping secrets for the madam, are you? Jane quipped. I don't know what you're talking about, or to which madam you refer. Jane grinned. Oh, think you do. All this insanity around here would make me want to talk. Don't you want to talk to me? Aaron's job with the Lords always had a bit more to do just to their personal valet and driver. Jane knew that. She knew he was so someone they relied on for other more secretive and clandestine tasks. But Aaron, like a steel trap, if I were you, he said, I would do if I were you and hand any kind of respect for my position here. His mind my own business to that, Jane, Aaron replied. Jane scoffed and lifted a brow at Aaron's unrelenting loyalty. Over in one of the new brightly lit hallways, a passage door, hidden behind a large pillar, began to crack open. It was Genevieve and Jonathan finally emerging from a long night hidden in deep, long, and tangled secret corridors beneath the mansion, locked there by Celeste Divinity Lord. Jonathan, who had a shocking confrontation with the ghost of his biological father, Albert, was lived that his sister had done this to him. Genevieve, whose mind was now totally cohibited by the spirit of Sabrina Lord, quickly felt Jonathan alone to find his sister. He was like a bull in china shop searching for her, and finally he did, cutting her toddler babying in the nursery, with Charlotte in the room too, both children freshly removed from the turret room, safe and sound after a frightening night. As long as they're all right, I guess no one else matters, Jonathan said coldly as Celeste turned to the nursery door. Celeste wasn't surprised to see him. She knew and Genevieve would eventually find their way out, although she hoped whatever they experienced in the secret corridors would scare him enough to he'd leave Terramore, and the idea of exposing the truth of his claim to the Lord family fortune. Charlotte, honey, would you take your brother out to play? Celeste asked. Charlotte walked over to her stepbrother and took her baby brother. She then turned to Jonathan, and suddenly a flash in her mind, bright like the sun, showed her a new vision. The vision was of Jonathan and her father, the faces of two men suddenly molding together into the face of Albert Lord, Charlotte's grandfather. Suddenly, or sorry, Granddaddy knows you, Charlotte said. Jonathan turned to the psychic little girl, surprised at what she said. Excuse me? My granddaddy knows you. I think he does. I see him in you. Did he know you? She asked the young girl, still trying to figure out how her psychic abilities worked. Jonathan nodded his head, feeling sure of himself, feeling Charlotte's strange words about Albert actually seeing him and below the mansion, seeing his ghost was a sign. Reveal who you are. Charlotte, please, Celeste said somewhat impatiently. Go to the gardens with Fabian. Charlotte complied, leaving Celeste alone with her incest brother. How could you? Jonathan asked as soon as Charlotte and the baby were gone. How could you do that to me? Johnny, I was protecting you. You and Genevieve were the safest in the house where you were. I didn't even put my children there. You were safe, Celeste said. Protecting, safe. What are you talking about, Celeste? You practically locked us in a dungeon. You didn't do this for me or for Genevieve's safety. You did it for yourself. I don't know what you expect to happen to me down there, but it wasn't to keep me safe. You don't know what was happening up here, Jonathan. It was the devil. It was the most evil thing I ever seen. It took over this whole house. I saved you and Genevieve, Celeste repeated. No, no, stop lying. What you've been doing this whole time is trying to control how and when I finally tell everyone that I am part of this family. Blood, I am their blood, Celeste. And you're trying to stop me. Well, I'm not going to be stopped anymore. I'm going to tell Jacob that I am his brother. Jonathan, you cannot do that. Listen to me. I promised him I would never reveal that anyone that Albert had another son. I told him that not because I wanted to keep you from your rightful inheritance, but because I know what Jacob does to his rivals. The moment he knows he has yet another sibling to fight off, there is no telling what he would do to you or me, Celeste explained. Right, or you. That's the crux of it, all this. I'm not afraid of Jacob, Celeste. But you are. You are afraid of him. You're worried he'd do what he did to everyone else. You're just as disposable, and you don't want to be. You're now the lady of this house, the wife of the powerful Jacob Lord, and why would anyone want to risk that position, right? That's what this is about. This has always been about you, Jonathan Ralph. No, Johnny, Celeste began before being interrupted. Yes, Jonathan shouted back. Celeste burst into tears. Her brother was right. Celeste had been manipulating the whole situation not to truly protect Jonathan from Jacob's plots and schemes, but also because it would indeed put her in a different position in the household. She threw Jacob's trust, and then Jacob lost his trust in someone. He punished them severely. Jacob then entered the baby's nursery, freshly returned from the hospital from a long Long night out. What is all this? Where are my children? Jacob asked, hearing the Divinity siblings fighting from the hallway. Celeste cleared her eyes in tears, attempting to pretend nothing was wrong, but it was too late. I have to tell you something, and my sister is fighting me on it, Jonathan said directly. Jonathan, Celeste said, in sniffles, fearing the worst to come. Jacob lifted a brow. He was exhausted from the terrible night of the awful exorcism, the terrible events at the lighthouse. He was in no mood to fight any more. Jacob puffed and sat down in a small, overstuffed chair in the corner of the nursery and looked over at Celeste, who seemed not only just as tired as him, but dissolved and worried of what Jonathan was about to say. Celeste stood there, her stomach in knots. Jonathan began to unravel secrets of his paternity. First came the affair, then the secret child, him. The facts clear. Jonathan was a lord, a brother, a blood relative, and direct heir to the family dynasty, no matter how bad anyone wanted to pretend it wasn't really true. Once Jonathan was done, the room fell silent. Jacob looked over at his half brother and smirked. You think I don't already know this? Jacob said calmly. Celeste knew Jacob knew. She had been playing both sides the whole time, to try to keep Jacob from punishing her from telling Jonathan, and from Jonathan uprising her place in the Lord family heresy and power. She didn't want Jonathan or Jacob to know the other knew. She was caught in the web of her own double crossing, surprising Jonathan. You know? He asked Jacob, then turned to Celeste. I've always known. I've been in this family much longer than you, and honestly, I've created much of the narrative around the family name, what people think is true or not, what people want to believe or not, what people hear is fact or fiction. All of it, every strange secret and odd story that the people of this island have heard about the shadowy family from the Terramore forest. I've been able to circulate, cut out things no one needs to know, and add things people would like to hear. It's all about something I've done in all my life. That's the truth. And yes, even your existence was not immune to my twist. Celeste made it seem like you didn't know, Jonathan said. She's a good wife. She wanted to make sure to keep her hands clean of any exposure, Jacob said, to which Celeste sounded like a forgiveness. I intend to stay here, Jacob, and take my place here as one of Albert's sons. You can't change my mind, Jonathan said uncertainly. Jacob got up and stuffed the stuffy chair, a cane lifting his long, hard limbs from his throne, and walked over to his half brother and to look him dead in the eye. What happened the night before, the terror, the tragedy, the shocking events changed Jacob's headspace. He looked evil, real evil in the face. He saw death. He saw suffering in a way that perhaps he had not before. Despite his own murderous past, he felt different. Now he felt calmer. In a strange way, he felt at peace with the idea of Jonathan being a part of their family. Long gone were the worries of threats to his own power of the family, business, and money. He knew who he was, and of the he could do with his power. No long lost bastard sibling would change that. Very well, Jacob said, surprising everyone. You'll be welcome here as one of us, Jacob revealed. Celeste's heart was beating almost out of her chest. Relief washed over her face of the waves of the Atlantic that was often bashed up against the rocky coastline. Really, Jacob? She asked, rushing over to him and falling into his arms. Really, he replied. Thank you, Jacob, thank you, she said, kissing him on the lips. I'm going to find the children and give them the good news that their uncle is staying, Celeste said gleefully, even though Jonathan was still bitter with her for locking him in the underground tunnels. One note, Jacob then said he and Jonathan were alone. You'll be brought on in any capacity you wish, as the youngest son of my father. I cannot deny you that. I won't deny you that. It's only fair. But be sure to keep yourself in strict understanding that this home and this place is a place you are welcomed in, but it's a home that I rule. Jonathan lifted a brow and crossed his arms across the chest. You rule, not Rebecca? Jacob smiled. My mother was, shall we say, incapacitated during the storm. She's ill. Until she returns, he paused. If she returns, I will manage the household and company as I see fit. Just keep yourself on notice. Is that morning? Jonathan asked as Jacob turned to leave. Then turned back to look at Jonathan in the face again to answer. He thought about the reply to Jonathan. He wanted his new brother to feel welcome, as he said when Celeste was in the room. He warned Jonathan to feel good about being part of the family no matter what, but he also knew that he had to keep things in line with this main goal, keeping the power. Then he answered the only way Jacob Ford could really coldly. It is a warning. Jacob winked at his brother, who stood alone now, the children nursery on full circle. Do not mess with Jacob Lord. At Welshport Hope Hospital, Nicholas Jordan, Sheila Hoffman, and Dr. Peter Ward were busy with patients who had injuries. From the wild storm that passed over the island over the night. One man came in with broken bones from a falling tree. A woman and her two daughters had come after one of the children had slipped in the street and twisted their ankle. An older man suffered a heart attack during the storm after a battery of thunder and lightning had frightened him to illness. It was the perfect test for the fresh paid of medical students who were training on the job in real time. During the storm, however, both Nick and she found themselves in the blackout together in a romantic and intimate way. They were now locked in a passionate romance that she did not want to implode with the revelation she discovered at Matthew's house just 4 months before. The truth about Alice Winterbourne's return to life via reincarnation, as she had feared this revelation could make Nick desire more information about the woman he loved. Could she be in this time? Could she be in another time? Could he contact her? Those were all things that she did not want Dick to pursue. She had just found this new love and she did not want to lose it. The truth about Alice Winterbourne's return to life via reincarnation, as she had feared this revelation could make Nick desire more information about the woman he loved. Could she be? Sorry, I would do that. At the nurse's station, Nick, Dr. Ward, and Ashia met to catch their breath. You both still keeping your head above water, Dr. Water chuckled, handing patient files to a nurse. So far, so good, Nick replied. The new patients are comfortable. Evie, too, she's been asking for you, Nick. As she has said, revealing Evie was at the hospital. She's very anxious to be reunited with her baby. I'll be sure to take care of that. The two of you have a good amount of patients rounds to handle, Dr. Ward said, handing them both more patient files to catch up on. Nick smirked as she took a deep sigh at her at the work ahead of them. Please give my sister my best. I'll be in to see her soon. Just as Dr. Ward was able to reply he would pass the message from Nick to his sister Evie, hospital doors burst open. Two men were carrying another man who was soaking wet from head to toe and weak. All three suddenly collapsed on the ground. Dr. Ward, Nick, and Sheila with a nurse rushed over to help. What happened? Dr. Ward asked as they all flipped to the soaking wet man over. Pulse is weak, she said. Nick opened the man's eyes to examine. They were bloodshot, cold, almost dead. He washed up on shore, doctor. He mumbled something, but we couldn't make sense of it. One of the men said, as Dr. Ward mentioned, check for broken bone, or could have fallen into the sea during the storm. Nick asked. Check for broken bones, Ward instructed. As she and Nick both took one side of the man's body, one's body, he was on the gurney and carefully checked his body for broken bones, but only found waterlogged and wrinkled skin, signs of long lasting hours in salt water. Nothing, Nick said. Here, too, she replied. The boat. The man finally said, coming out of a stupor. Boat? What boat? Ward asked. The boat, the storm, the man replied. Yes, the storm. There was a storm. Did your boat capsize? Ward asked. The man grumbled. He nodded yes from his laid out position. Was there anyone else on the boat with you, or were you out there alone? Ward asked. We should get Rains to check this shoreline with officers. There might be others, he said. How did I? Many others, the man said. Fishing ship. You were on a fishing ship? A fishing ship from here? Nick asked, almost immediately realizing what that meant. The man nodded yes. Nick got close to them, almost where they were face to face. What fishing ship? Wake up, man. What fishing ship? Nick shouted. Dr. Ward pulled Nick back. Dr. Jordan, calm down. What's going on? Nick took a beat, then asked calmly, what is the name of the ship that went down? The newest was Matthew's ship. Oh my God, as she had said, stunned. Did anyone make it out with you? Where's Captain Winterbourne? Nick asked. We all went down. We all went under. I didn't see anyone else on when I was lost up the shore, the man said. He's right. One of the men that brought him in said he was the only one. All right, let's get him in to check him out. Nick, take a minute. Dr. Ward instructed. The sailor was taken into the exam room. Nick and Sheila stayed in front of the in front. Nick sat down and dropped his head into his lap. I can't believe this. I can't believe this. Matthew can't be gone. He just can't be, Nick sobbed. Shh, I'm so sorry. What can I do? She said, rubbing Nick's back. I don't know. How am I going to tell Evie? She just lost Sebastian. She just had her baby, and now this. I don't know how it's going. She's going to get through this one. Matthew had become everything to her. Nick added, I know, I know. I don't know what to tell you, she said. But then she had an epiphany. There might be something. What? Nick asked, lifting his head as she said and looked into Nick's green eyes. She was very much in love with Willetta, to tell the truth, spilled from her guts, even into what her friend Gregor's advice not to start a new relationship with secrets. She thought of Alice's death, and she remembered to the book she found in Matthew's house. The names of the mysterious corridors, its coordinates that supposedly marked the portal with where miraculously reborn in the world, she brought again how this might give Nick hope that Alice was still alive. And he'd go looking to prove, you know, but Matthew's sudden loss at sea could mean this too. He might come back just like once in a book. There was hope. When we had dinner at Matthew's, I found something. It was a book, and it had names of people, many, many names. There were names of Matthew and Alice's ancestors. Next to Alice's name, there was a year by it, and I asked Matthew about, as she confessed, a book with names? What? Nick wondered, attempting to connect the dots with his own volume one. She got up and seat next to Nick at the hospital foyer. She was about to tell him something she wasn't sure he'd believe, but was now sure he deserved to know, especially now that Matthew may be gone too. Nick, this is going to sound bizarre. It's going to sound like I'm making it up, but this is what Matthew told me. He said it was a log, a log of all the names of the people who had passed away, all his ancestors. It was a huge, thick book. The last name in the log was Alice's, and it had a number on it. Uh, on it. When I asked Matthew what the numbers meant, because I had a strange hunch, and he confirmed it, it was not nautical coordinates to a place out at sea where his people believed the person who died came back to life. Reincarnation, as she confirmed. Reincarnation? Yes, she said softly as she began to see the wheels in Nick's mind starting to turn and click and make sense of what she was saying. Matthew could come back from this, and Alice too. They're alive? They're out there somewhere? I don't know, Nicholas. I don't know, she said. But you knew about this book. You asked him about it. And he said that that's what the book was. So is Alice alive? Where is she? Nick shouted. I don't know, Matthew. I don't know, Nick. Matthew explained that it was possibly that she could be out there somewhere, but she wasn't too keen on figuring it was true or not. He said it was superstition and lore from his people. Nick could be wrong. Nick, it could be nothing, she replied, or it could be mean everything, he shouted. I don't know, she replied, unhappy. He was so enthusiastic about the possibility of Alice's return. You should have told me all about this that I could have asked Matthew myself and get more information. I mean, if Alice is alive, if she's back on Earth, change on Earth that would change so much. Nick said, "Change what? Change us?" she asked. Nick didn't answer her. You should have told me. I wasn't even sure if it was true, Nick. It sounds insane, doesn't it? She said. But you believed it enough not to tell me about it, Nick replied with dagger like words to Sheeta's tearing heart. You kept it from me, Nick added as Sheeta's lip began to quiver. She paused, unsure how to continue the sentence. I'm sorry. Nick did not reply further. He only furrowed his eyebrow and grabbed hold of the patient files Ward had given them. He split them in half and handed half to Sheeta. We have rounds to do, and I have to see my sister, he said coldly. Nick, I'm sorry. I would have told you if I knew more. Don't you believe me? Nick turned to her. He did believe she was sorry. He believed that she was sorry she had to tell him about this whole strange situation because he too knew what it could mean for them as a couple. But the truth was, Nick had seen Sebastian come back. He had seen so many once unbelievable things since he moved to Welshport. And this idea of reincarnation, Welshport, was not something he was going to ignore, especially if Matthew had practically confirmed it to her. I believe you. I'm almost sorry that I do, he said, sadly realizing she had been deceitful. Nick, wait, Nick, she shouted, but he did not turn back to her by her lie by a mission to continue the conversation. She had stood in the foyer of her possible and realized she may have lost the best sense she had ever had. As the sun disappeared over the west ridge woods of Welshport, the small and lonely cabin on Good Island was filled again with life. Mary and Philip had not only Sebastian back in their home, but also Jacqueline Gray, the last witch of the Sisters of Highsgrove. Together, Mary and Jacqueline united their powers and were successful at aiding Father Ryan in defeating the demon Caspian. Their mission was complete for now. Cabin Good Island was filled again with life. Mary and Philip had not only Mary, who was pregnant with Philip's baby, felt her child swirl in her belly like a happy little fish in a bowl. It reminded Mary of her pregnancy with Charlotte and how happy she was at the time that she was going to be a mother. Those happy memories were clouded by the fact that Jacob took their child away from her falsely accused her of awful things in town. Mary touched her bell just in front of a warm earth and thought to herself, I'll keep you close, she promised, as to not allow the same fate to this baby to what happened to Charlotte. Not that Philip was anything like Jacob. What's it like being a mother for the first time? Jacqueline asked as she came in with some uh, tea for the two of them. This isn't my first, Mary replied with a smile. Oh, how many children do you have? Jacqueline asked. One more, a girl. She lives with her father, Mary replied with a slight tightness in her voice. I don't have children. I wish I did. I guess time is ticking away for me. Not really. We're about the same age. Maybe it can happen soon. It only takes the right pair of people. Philip and I came together in a very out of the ordinary circumstances, Mary said, or remembering their time locked in the chariot of Terror. And I see you've grown close to Sebastian. Sebastian is not exactly the right person for me, Jacqueline replied as she sipped her tea. Baggage, Mary agreed. Baggage, Jacqueline smiled. On another topic, I can't thank you enough for coming with Sebastian for helping us. You have no idea how many times you've saved, how many lives you've saved, Mary added. I almost didn't, but when I was alone after I sent Sebastian on his way, I thought about everything he told me, and I felt horrible at the idea that he may go back with nothing to help you here. I couldn't sit back and let God knows what happened. Without my help, I wouldn't predict what happened or if we would succeed, but I'm glad we did too. It was all worth it, even without the third, Jacqueline said. The third? Philip asked, coming in from the rooms after a long day's sleep. Philip's Philip, there's tea, Mary said, handing him a cup. What's about a third? What's this about a third? He asked again, exhausted from the night before. Jacqueline gulped. I thought you all understood before we met. Understood? No, I mean, you have to remember, I was thrown into all this myself. My mother died suddenly. I'm I'm learning about this as it happens in real time, Mary explained. Every coven is connected by three witches, so the two of us and someone else, Jacqueline said. But there is not a third witch, Philip pointed out. There has to be, otherwise we wouldn't have been able to do what we did to cast it. Our powers would have been useless. There's a third witch out there somewhere. She has powers too. She may not know she has those powers, but she does, Jacqueline said. So we were only able to use our powers, our covenant's gift, because there was a third witch who helped us, Mary wondered. Well, she didn't help us, but her close proximity and the fact she is alive is the only way we were able to corral the power of the sisters of, and destroy casting cast, or Jacqueline explained further. So none of you know who the person is? Philip looked at Mary and Mary at Philip. No, Mary replied with a soft voice. Looks like looks like we have another sister, replied Jacqueline said with with a smile. Then Sebastian came in. He looked exhausted. He had one of the most awful nights of his existence. His eyes were puffy, his face was still worn and wasted of sleep. Everyone in the room knew what had happened. Mary was worried the awful reality of what had occurred at the lighthouse would take Sebastian down a dark road when he was so quickly coming back to the kind hearted person he was the night before. Jacqueline watched Jacqueline watched this. She had suddenly become very interested, walked out of the room and into the one she was in almost like a zombie. He did not greet them. He did not acknowledge them. He just floated in like a silent breeze and went to an open window that sent fresh sea air to his face that was already cold from his inability to connect with his own human warmth. There was a sort of connection between the two of them, albeit new and untested, but Jacqueline was intrigued, and he left her with tingles that ran up and down her spine, the good kind of tingles which, for Jacqueline, were a new sensation. Who was now sitting in the room with Mary and Jacqueline, instantly noticing Jacqueline's interest in the vampire. He found it endeared, sweet, even. For her part, Mary slowly rose from the chair and went over to her cousin, who was now staring out of the cabin windows toward the flashing light of the new, now infamous lighthouse. The same lighthouse is where, uh, yeah, the same house is now the same lighthouse his own father had supposedly jumped from, and the same lighthouse he saved his child from being thrown off by his grandmother. Are you okay? Mary asked, patting her cousin's back. I don't know, he said softly. I know seeing your child for the first time under such terrible circumstances must be being triggering for you, Sebastian, but you saved him. He's safe. You should be happy about that. Saved him. Saved him to a life of what? Misery? Maybe I should have brought him back here, Mary, Sebastian said. You know that wouldn't have been possible, Sebastian. It's a different world here. It's not a place for a baby, Mary said. Sebastian turned to her and looked at her own baby bump and saw a bit of irony of what she was saying. Is that so? He asked with sarcasm. Sebastian, I'm different than you. Philip and I are number one together and number two. Not like you. Mary said definitively. You could. Sorry, could you honestly say you would have been able to been the best part of raising that child? Only a night at night. Babies don't sleep the way you do. They have their own clocks. Let's see. Clocks. Sebastian rolled his eyes like a defiant teenager. Uh, he knew she was right, but the sting in his heart still felt as strong as it did when he handed the child he took from Rebecca's dangerous grasp to his Uncle Jacob. Mary, would you do something for me? He asked. Mary lifted her brows. She was cautious at agreeing to Sebastian's request, knowing that sometimes he would wish for the very impossible thing, since it could put many people in danger. Jacqueline and Philip, in earshot of shot, both thought the same. as Mary and shot each other looks. That depends on what you want for me, Sebastian. Seeing what he and Mary were being listened to, uh, pulled Mary into a corner of the room where they could not see the other. Cousin, he said to her, uh, okay. Cousin to cousin, she confirmed, but it's not a promise. What do you need? Mary asked, happy to help him as a way to repay him for finding and bringing back Jacqueline, and still very, wary of the possibility of dangerous requests. In the book your mother left me, you if there were something in there, something you could read and use to protect my son, would you use that spell of protection for him? It was quite sweet, Mary realized. All he wanted was some way to protect the baby born just the night before in the middle of the real exorcism. All Mary said with a sweet smile to the new father, I can try, of course. I can try and see if there's anything in the new book that would protect your son. Of course, uh, I could have lost him last night. You should have seen my grandmother. She was not herself. She seemed lost in some kind of, I don't know, worse than a fog. She was much, much more lost than anything or anyone I could have compared to. She had my son hanging over the side of the lighthouse, and all I could do was imagine her. Yeah, imagine him going into the sea. If there was something in your book that would protect him from any more horrible things that anyone in my family have suffered, I would give you anything you want to do it. Sebastian, listen to me. Your family. You saved your son from death. You also saved us from much worse. Um, your son is going to be your boss, and is going to Boston, bringing him back. That's Gabriel. Sorry, that's payment enough. That's payment enough. Because of that bravery, I'll be able to give birth to this child, and hopefully one day be able to full reunite with my daughter Charlotte. If there is a spell in that book to protect newborns, it's your son's. Mary said with tears in her eyes. She was touched by Sebastian's kind gesture toward his own. Gabriel, she said softly. What? Mary asked. I named him. His name is Gabriel. Mary, tears finally fell at the sound of the baby's name. That's so beautiful, she said softly. Gabriel Lord. She pulled her cousin in close and hugged him tightly. The walls kept the sound of the conversation away from Philip, but not Jacqueline. She heard it with all her powerful abilities of magic. She was now sure she could do something for Sebastian and help him, and perhaps they could get closer than they were. Maybe Gabriel was Jacqueline's next project, a project to bring her closer to the objects of her affection, Sebastian. If he wanted to a spell to protect his child, a spell of safety is what Jacqueline would concoct. It might be a surprise, the witch from Boston said in her mind as the happy grin splashed across her beautiful face. Back at the hospital, in a room lit by small little lamps that hummed the newest form of electricity, Evie felt the stringing of pain after he her rushed labor. She was sleeping off the medicine she was given to her after she left Terramore, but the medication soon wore off, and when she opened her eyes, her mother Aurora was sitting at the bedside. Evie moaned as she tried to sit up in her bed. Take it easy now, take it easy, Aurora said, rushing over to her daughter's side. Did I have the baby? Evie asked in her groggy state. Aurora giggled. Yes, I did, Evie asked excitedly. Where's my baby? Dr. Ward and Nick entered the room. Dr. Ward was carrying her newborn baby boy. Evie, this is your boy, Nick said as Dr. Ward handed him his nephew, and then Nick handed the baby to Evie. My boy, my baby boy, Evie said as the tears came flooding from her face at the night of the beautiful child in her arms. His eyes a light gray color, lips a perfect pink, his sweet little smile perking as soon as he and Evie made eye contact. He's so handsome, Aurora gushed of her new grandson. He's the most beautiful thing I've seen, Evie said. Looks like his uncle, I think, Nick joked. Jacob saved him, Dr. Ward said. Saved him? What do you mean? Evie asked. Her memory of the kidnapping by Rebecca seemed to vanish with all the happenings of having a child. Don't you remember? Or asked Nick, shot his mother a look, hoping to let Evie have this moment with the baby without having to live some of the trauma from the night of his birth. Evie noticed this. What? Tell me what happened to the new mother begged. Rebecca and Cashman had some sort of evil plan, Evie, a plan with for your baby. It was a sick and twisted thing that I really don't think we should go over now. But as soon as the baby was born, Rebecca, not in her right state of mind, took him into the night after you have birth and went into the storm, out to the lighthouse. She wanted to throw him off the landing, and Rebecca paused and shook her head at the horror she was about to reveal, thanks to Gregory Rain's update to her. What what happened? Evie pushed darling. She tried to throw him off the landing. Evie gasped in the horror and helped her baby tight, nosing his little nose to hers. But he was saved by Jacob, Aurora finally said, neglecting to mention she was also involved in Cassian's plan at the beginning, albeit such she a much more unwilling counterpart. Evie cried and continued to snuggle her baby, happy that was safe, healthy, and in her arms. The baby too snuggled up his mother. He squeezed and giggled in a show of affection that seemed almost too perfect and too happy to be real, but it was. He was really there in her arms, a big, woolly pink baby with eyes of gray that she could hold, touch, kiss. He was there. He was hers, and he was Sebastian's. In the fading memories of horror, she thought of Sebastian and how proud he would be if he were to see his baby. How proud Sebastian would be to see this boy. That if he was hospital was being honest, sorry, was truly his spitting image. She saw her former husband so much in the new baby's face and smile it warmed her heart. The love she once had for Sebastian was still there, but how it was more of a fondness, like a happy memory, not a passion of romance like it was the night the baby was conceived. Nonetheless, the baby was a symbol of their once solid love. They turned out was as fragile as cast made of sand up against an ocean wave, cold and unforgiving. Jacob was able to convince Rebecca to give him the child, and after Rains took Rebecca away, the baby was never hurt, Dr. Ward said, printing the report Rains had given him, which in truth was false. Sebastian had saved the baby and handed him to Jacob. That secret troop would stay at the lighthouse at Sebastian's request. What would your name be, little one? Evie asked in her tear-soaked smile. Gabriel, Nick said, just before he brought us the baby. Jacob asked that you name it Gabriel, something about the name being the name of a guardian angel. Evie wondered why Jacob would even think he would have any kind of say in naming her son. He had been so cruel to her. He had an atrocious history with almost everyone in the family. If anyone was going to name her son, it was going to be Evie. She rolled her eyes at Nick for his news of what Jacob supposedly wanted. But then Evie's eyes locked with her beautiful newborn baby. He startled up and stared up at his mother and reached for her almost as if to say hello. A calmness fell over. Or noticed self, selfless motherhood was quickly setting in. The name Gabriel fit him. It truly did. He looked like a Gabriel. Evie's heart warmed, and nothing mattered now, not even who came up with his name. Evie, of course, did not know the request came from the baby's father, Sebastian, not Jacob. Jacob was just fulfilling a promise. Another secret truth that would stay at the lighthouse for Sebastian by Sebastian's request. Gabriel Jordan Lord, this will be your name, Evie said to her son as he yelped with approval. I think he likes it, Aurora said, smiling. Yes, Evie replied. I cannot wait to meet Matthew, she added. As Matthew's name